Hey guys, John here from Sonic Drive Studio. I hope you're all doing well and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to do something fun, and that is compare my EVH 5150 amplifiers to three popular modeling platforms: the Fractal Audio XFX3, the Neural DSP Quad Cortex, and of course the newly released Fender ToneMaster Pro. I recently got the Fender ToneMaster Pro and I've been enjoying it a lot. I did a full demo and review on the channel recently, by the way, which you can watch up here or down here if you're interested. But I haven't tried the officially licensed EVH amp models on the channel yet. And I've also not compared the ToneMaster Pro to a real amplifier yet, so this was basically the perfect opportunity. Now I chose these three modeling platforms because they are the only hardware modeling platforms that I own that emulate the EVH 5153 amplifiers. I don't want to try plugins and I don't want to try capturing or profiling this time around, just good old amp models. Now there are some very important aspects to this comparison that I do want to mention first. So the amps that I have over here are the EVH 5153 50-watt EL34 and also the LBX, the first version of the LBX. And none of the modelers in this comparison aim to recreate the tones of these exact EVH 5153 iterations. Now next to these amplifiers, I've also tried a couple of other EVH models, and to be honest, they all have that typical EVH sound. There are some differences here and there in how the presence controls react, how the EQ controls react, how much gain there is on tap, but most of those differences can be dialed out by just tweaking the EQ and the gain, stuff like that. And one difference, for example, with the 100-watt EVHs versus the 50-watt EVHs, or the LBX ones for that matter, is that the presence controls react differently. With those 100-watt heads, you're going to have to crank up the presence more in order to get the same brightness as with the 50-watt model, for example, at the noon position. However, just as I said, an EVH amplifier, whether it's the small one, the 50-watt one, or the 100-watt model, they all sound like an EVH, and they all have that same tight and ferocious character, especially on the red channel, with a lot of saturation. So even though there might be differences between these amplifiers and the amp modelers, because of that fact alone, I do think that you can kind of dial that out by tweaking the controls a little bit. Now I will be using the exact same OwnHammer impulse response for all the tones, so on the real amplifiers as well as in the modelers. And that is the modern cabinet with Mic Mix 3 from the recently released OwnHammer Rockbox edvh 2013A speaker. That's of course based on an EVH speaker. However, there's one more thing that we do have to keep in mind here, and that is the fact that the impedance curve across all the modelers will be slightly different as well. And that might also have an influence on the top end or the bottom end a little bit. But again, those differences can probably be dialed out with the controls. I'm using riffs that were recorded with my ESP LTD NW44 with a bare knuckle Aftermath pickup in it, a great sounding guitar. And the amplifiers are being fed into my RedSeven Amplification Amp Central reactive load and then into the IR. And in the full mix comparisons, I'm doing a low cut at 80 Hz just to make a little bit of room for the drums and the bass. And then for the isolated sections, I'm turning off the low cut, just so you can really hear that low end extension of the amplifiers and the amp models. But keep in mind that because of that, they might sound a little bit too bassy in those isolated segments, but I just want you guys to hear the character of the low end, okay? Because these amplifiers have a lot of low end. Even this little guy over here. Oh, and by the way, we're only going to compare the red channels. No blue or green channels will be harmed during this comparison. First, let's compare the EVH 5153 50-watt EL34 to the modeling platforms. And in terms of settings, I'm not doing anything special. All the EQ controls, including the resonance control on the back, will be set to the noon position. And gain is set to around 10 o'clock or so, which is plenty of gain for this particular version of the EVH. For the XFX3, I'm using the 5153 100-watt red amp model. For the Quad Cortex, I'm using the EV101S3S red EL34 100-watt amp model. That's a mouthful. And for the ToneMaster Pro, of course, I'm going to use the licensed EVH 5153 Stealth red amp model. Okay, let's go ahead and take a listen right now. Okay, that was interesting for sure. Now let's check out the isolated comparison. So just with the guitars, check it out. Okay, again, quite interesting. Now what I'm going to do is compare the modeling platforms to this little EVH over here. So the LBX1, also on the red channel, with the EQ controls set to the noon positions. The only difference here is that I cranked the resonance control on the back up all the way. And of course I also raised the gain a bit here because this one has a bit less gain on tap. Still enough though. And I think that I matched the sound of this amplifier pretty closely to this amp, but let's just take a listen to the comparison and yeah, check it out. All right. Again, the isolated comparison. Check it out. Okay, so here are my thoughts on this comparison, and let's start with the XFX3. The XFX3's model doesn't sound exactly the same, but it sounds pretty close. It definitely sounds like a different EVH amplifier on the red channel. In terms of the overall feel and dynamics and clarity, I guess it sounds a little bit more flat and sort of sterile, whatever that means, but that's just how I like to describe it. Where the amp has a nice overall brightness and sort of sag going on that's just really present and keeps it very much forward the entire time. But it definitely still sounds great, and again, it just sounds like a different EVH basically. Very close. The Quad Cortex also has a bit of a different tone, but it still sounds great. It also just sounds like a different EVH amplifier basically. It's a bit more pokey in the mids and a bit more tight in the bottom end, and I guess a little bit less saturated or compressed. But both the Fractal and the Neural DSP sound close enough and they will work fine in a mix. Again, they just sound like different EVH amplifiers basically. Unless we go very anal and analyze every single frequency and all that stuff, you know, in layman's terms, I thought they sounded pretty close and pretty good, despite the differences that there may be, you know, that I talked about in the beginning of the video. Now, unfortunately, the elephant in the room here is the Fender ToneMaster Pro's officially licensed EVH amp models. At least the red channel, that is, because that's the only one that I use here. And I kind of feel bad for Fender because this is the officially licensed EVH amp model after all, right? But unfortunately, it's not even close. The frequency response is way off. The feel and the distortion character is also way off. And the model also seems a bit undergained. All the tightness, punch, and clarity and hugeness isn't there. It's just completely lacking. It basically sounds like a completely different amplifier. So that signature EVH tone that the EVH amplifiers are known for is just not there. Now, I do have to admit that I've never tried the EVH 100 watt stealth amplifier myself. So take that into account. Perhaps the real amplifier, you know, that version of the EVH sounds closer to this amp model. But honestly, I was expecting that amp model to sound way closer to my actual amplifiers. Kind of like the Fractal Audio XFX3 and the Neural DSP Quad Cortex. You know how they sounded in this comparison. Not exactly the same, but just a little bit different, but still like an EVH. Now, I even did a factory reset because I figured, you know, maybe there's something up with firmware or something like that, but unfortunately that didn't help at all. So honestly, I don't know what's up with that and what happened there. You know, it's impossible for me to say. As you can see and hear in my ToneMaster Pro review, I thought that the unit in general is a pretty cool device. But yeah, the EVH amp models, for some reason, I don't know, I'm not a fan of them. So guys, at Fender, maybe that's something to look at. It's important for my viewers and for me that I judge this, you know, as objectively as I can. So this is just my plain opinion. So let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Which platform sounded the best to you? You know, what did you think of the differences between these two amplifiers? Let me know. And thank you so much for watching this video. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below as that really helps the channel out. I'd usually appreciate that. And you can also follow Sonic Drive Studio on Facebook and Instagram. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you soon. Cheers.